Had a patient when I was in my psychiatry rotation in medical school, who had said that he had killed 2 people when he was in a gang 15 years ago, and was now hearing the voice of God telling him to hurt himself as punishment. He kept darting his eyes around the room. Definitely creeped me out during the patient interview. I'm a psychiatric nurse practitioner now, but when I was a licensed practical nurse I worked at a state security hospital that housed some very dangerous people. Many of these people had killed others. Some had killed their own families. I think the patient that made me the most nervous was a woman who is about 5 feet tall, Asian, and enjoyed making small talk with the staff. I had picked up a shift on that floor and had never met her before, and ended up chatting for about 10 minutes as I was passing out medication. I read her chart after that and later learned that she had actually killed her children with some scissors and then stabbed her husband to death as well. That was kind of shocking. Not the person in question in the story. I'm a psych sitter in an emergency room, and a nurse that works there told me about the one patient she was working to transfer, that genuinely scared her. This man would just go on and on to her about how he would find her after he got out, cut her limbs off and peel her skin away, and things so horrible she would remember it forever. But she wouldn't get to remember because he would kill her after. Years later, she hasn't heard anything of the man since. This story is the reason that, when I sit for a genuinely deranged patient, I flip my name badge around so my name can't be seen by the patient, even if it's only my first name. EMT here had a patient who held their hands together and prayed to their delusions and asked them for reasons why they shouldn't kill me. The patient had a previous miscarriage, and one of her delusions was that she still had the baby, and it would tell her to do things. In her defense, when she was praying and speaking to her delusions, she was saying reasons why she doesn't want to hurt me and telling her delusions that she really doesn't want to do any of the things it was telling her to do. Turned out to be a really easy patient. Incredibly easy-tempered once we got her in the ambulance. She just occasionally spoke to her baby or patted her stomach, and told him he was a good baby. I'm a medical student. One time in the ER, I was asked to do an H&P on a homeless man with a complaint of detox in the chart. He was a long-time meth user and schizophrenic. Just us two in his room, he wanted the lights off, and he admitted to wanting to hurt other people, having a history of incarceration due to assault, and kept talking to non-existent figures in the room. I felt uncomfortable and left before I really got much info. Used to teach English and psychology to Russian kids. Had one 14-year-old say he thought he was a sociopath. Told him it was unlikely and asked why he thought that. He proceeded to tell myself and the whole class how he witnessed his uncle crush the skulls of 3 men after an argument. Not a nurse, but a patient. Most of my hospitalizations I was with mild-mannered patients with the occasional severely psychotic patient, but not many I would be afraid of. One time I was in a psych ward after a suicide attempt that was for all of levels of care. Now usually hospitals separate by level of care, or really how much they need to keep an eye on you, so this was unusual. There was a guy in his 20s, that seemed to not like me very much. He would yell at me in a different language. Was extremely psychotic, at one point told the staff that he was inside of a gas station when asked where he was. The hospital staff was nice for the most part, and while they did the usual 15-minute checks, there wouldn't be staff sitting outside the rooms to make sure nobody went into each other's rooms. Which was scary, especially at night, when we would wake up in the morning and find stuff missing. Said psychotic patient choked his roommate, and they started watching outside the rooms. His poor roommate wasn't even mentally ill, he had gotten stabbed and the ER staff thought it was self-inflicted. I ended up only staying for a few days. After that I managed to BS my way home as I genuinely didn't feel safe. I remember thinking I didn't kill myself, but this guy is going to kill me. Needless to say, I stayed out of the hospital for a while out of fear. EMS here. I am a huge fan of psych patients and I love hearing the things they have to say, and talking to them. Normally they're pretty easy transfers and calls. Normally. One night we were picking up out of the ER going to a psych facility about 45 minutes away. Nurse states patient has a history of schizophrenia and violence. I don't remember exactly what made him come into the hospital, but he was voluntary. This guy was a union laborer, probably 6.4 plus 250 pounds and straight muscle. I'm a pretty tough 6.0 185 18-year-old, age is important for later in the story, but no match for this dude. He had been given some meds to keep him calm about 4 hours before we got there, meaning it would wear out about 15 minutes into transport. He was calm and cooperative getting on the stretcher and into the truck. Super cool to talk to for the first 15 minutes. Then a switch flipped. He looked at me and there was nothing in his eyes. He started getting paranoid about everything. looking around behind him and just started acting weird. He asked me to put the pulse ox on him to check his heart rate, and I asked him if it would be alright if I also took a blood pressure while I did that. Big effing mistake. He had agreed, but as soon as I had the cuff pumped up he looks at me, grabs the cuff, rips it off and throws it at the back of the truck screaming that's enough. My partner is already doing 90 down the highway, trying to get us there, while I'm trying to talk this dude down. He starts trying to take off the straps, and swing them around, and it took a lot to get him secured and avoid being hit. I couldn't reach the restraints and keep him controlled, and soft restraints wouldn't have done things anyways. We called ahead and had security in the bay waiting for us. We were about 5 minutes out when he got aggressive again. He took a swing and connected with my jaw. It hurt. I don't remember what made him stop swinging, but he stopped, looked me dead in the eyes and said, "If you weren't a effing baby I would kill your stupid butt right now." This is the only time in my life I have felt true fear. We get to the hospital, security is with us and we're going up to the psych ward. I'm pushing the stretcher from behind when we stop to wait for the elevator. He turns around and yells, "Stop effing breathing," because he could hear and feel my breath or something. It was a very tense ride up, and I was very happy to transfer care and get the hell out. When I was in med school doing my psych rotation, the attending had me interview one of his patients at a desk. The desk was in a corner, and the patient was seated in between the desk and the exit. The patient was a big guy and obviously agitated. He said he was feeling anxious. I asked why, and he said he couldn't stop thinking about killing women to watch their eyes when they died. As a small woman, I suddenly became very uncomfortable with him looking me in the eyes. Despite him getting more and more agitated, I got through the interview without incident, and the attending apologized profusely for putting me in the physical situation and having me interview someone I shouldn't have. I worked as a nurse in a medium secure unit, where we housed numerous dangerous patients with all sorts of criminal backgrounds. As such, to maintain safety we would frequently have to use seclusion when patients became violent. Now these seclusion rooms are no joke, massive steel doors with numerous locks all the way down, then a steel hatch in the middle to be able to pass meds and food through. One night shift the alarm goes off in one of the seclusion areas. I was nurse in charge of the hospital and as such had to attend all incidents. When I arrived this tank of patient, over 6 feet, built like a brick house, had managed to break off the hatch in the door, and had punched out cold a member of staff. There was numerous staff attended but it was a real struggle to stop him from getting out. Ended up needing police assistance and he was tasered. The member of staff he hit, ended up with brain damage. I was on a psych rotation. Inpatient hospital. We had this dude that was antisocial personality, no emotion, no regard for others. They don't have a mind that can care about hurting others, what many criminals in lockup have. For vague reasons I won't get into, basically he was never going to be legally punished for attempting to kill relatives and killing many animals, but he was involuntarily admitted to our hospital. He was a big dude. Went after staff a few times, and though he was mostly calm when I was there were a few times, on my off days thankfully, he tried to fight staff and had to have many restrain him. I kept my distance since he wasn't my patient, and never approached the area he was in without multiple others with me. I'm a small person so I would not have had a chance in hell had he tried something. Night shift psych aid in a state hospital here. Some patients are fine and don't give us a problem. Right now there is a guy on my ward who gives all the night shift staff the creeps. He usually sleeps at night but recently he hasn't been. He's very demanding and if you don't give him what he wants right away he can get violent. I try to stay as far away from him as possible because he was moved to my ward for attacking staff. He didn't just attack them, he snuck up behind them, covered their mouths so they couldn't yell for help, and beat them. Last week a day shifter told him to get a shower and take his meds before she would turn the TV on for him. He said to her, "Do you want to get hit today?" Now they only have male staff dealing with him, but there isn't any male aides on my ward for night shift, patient here. I've been hospitalized in psych wards a few times and while I've never been afraid for my safety, I have definitely been in upsetting situations. The worst and saddest was an elderly man, probably 65 plus, who was obviously badly schizophrenic. He was very sweet but he'd get worked up and agitated by his delusions and would demand things, even impossible things. I didn't think he'd hurt me but I was pretty quick to get the nurse's attention about it. He also had to wear a colostomy bag, that he'd fuss with and make leak, then try to hug you. I don't think he even realized he'd made it leaky, he was just picking like it was a mania thing. I hope he's doing okay. I'm glad he's been the most unsettling. Psych nurse at psych hospital. This happened before I was a psych nurse and working at a residential home for schizophrenics. I was in a med room without a phone and the only worker in the building. One resident had a psychotic episode and tried to kill me. I quickly shut and locked door but was trapped, and he was banging on the door talking about the fall of man, Seaman and Eve. He would shake the door and try to get in, then pace and come back. He had tried to kill a neighbor years before because she was sunbathing, and he felt leading to the fall of man. He was in that frame of mind. I remember thinking I would never see my children again. When he started pacing again, I ran out the door and to the building next door. He chased me and grabbed my hair and took out a handful. Once a man stepped between us, he stopped, looked at me and came back to reality. He said, "I'm sorry I pulled your hair." I was actually incredibly sore the next day from shaking. He was a very nice guy, went on medication, but unfortunately he had to stop Clozaril due to white blood count. I have been in dangerous situations since at the hospital, but nothing like this. I work in a big city hospital. The scariest patients are the ones walking freely around the hospital. I've usually got a good idea who I'm dealing with otherwise. Most of the murderers I know about have a team of large guards with them. The patients on the psych floor don't scare me as much as the bathrooms on the psych floor do. The stories you read here in this thread are way more common than you think. The hospital security team is kept very busy. Big city hospitals are populated by some of the most vile, disgusting, dangerous, crazy people you could ever meet. Strangely, I would miss it all if I left to work elsewhere. Thanks for listening to Radio TTS. Hit the subscribe button to become part of the Ice Cream Sandwich Gang. And watch Misery from Stephen King. This is a great movie matching this subject.